you, the chat is not for me, right? That's nothing interesting here. And what I'll do is this meeting is being recorded. Continue. Okay, share screen. And I will show you, I want to show you some interesting things. And let me just start. So my starting point for this talk is a paper that was published many, many years ago by Charles Bachatli and Rached, En cas de voûtement en Egypte. And what they published there, they published a find that was found in Fustat, that is in Old Cairo, but was found out of archaeological context. That is, they have no idea whether this is a modern find or a medieval find. And so this is a question that this is an issue that I raised at the very beginning. I don't know how old this assemblage is. It could be very old, it could be much newer. And what they found, and you see here, they found this jar or pot, a black ceramic, very simple earthenware pot with a lid, with a wooden lid that was glued onto the pot. So the pot was really sealed. And when they opened it, they saw that something is coming out. And the thing that came out, and when the whole thing is open, it looks like this. You get the lid, the wooden lid, you get the pot, and you get a figurine made out of wax, hanging, tied. One leg is tied and tied in a way that tied to the lid so that it is, head downwards into the pot. On the bottom of the pot, they found some lime, some lime, and they said very clearly, there's no doubt at all that this is some sort of a magical assemblage, what we might call a voodoo doll. I will get to that term later on again. And the doll itself, this is a scan I took from their paper. The parts of the figurine are broken and were found in the lime on the bottom of the jar. And what they claim they could read on the back of the figurine is Hada Shahin ibn Adam wa Chava. This is Shahin, the son of Adam and Eve. That is presumably the name of the father and the mother of the intended victim were unknown. So just, sons of Adam and Eve. This was later discussed once again by a lady named Nicole Hansen, who wrote her PhD in Chicago on the continuity of Egyptian magic from pharaonic Egypt to the Islamic world. So she was very much interested in that, in situating this find in the context of earlier Egyptian voodoo dolls and aggressive magic. And you can find her discussion. What Hansen said that in 1998 she could still see, she saw the physical object. I, of course, never saw the physical object. Maybe when it's possible to go to Cairo, I might go to Cairo and look it up. I don't know if I'll ever see it. And all I have is this scan of an old paper by Shahin and by Rached and Bachatli. And what they also did, and Nicole Hansen also did, they adduced a recipe from the 13th century encyclopedia, the most famous book of magic in the Islamic world, Shams al-Ma'arif al-Kubra by Al-Buni. And they said, look, this recipe is more or less the same practice that we see in this pot and this voodoo doll. I will read the Arabic and translate it. وَإِذَا رَدْتَ رَمَدْ عَدُوُ أَوْ زَالِمْ فَخُدْ شَامَ كُرَّةً, and I assume it's Kurra min Shama or something like that. وَصَوِّرْ فِيهِ تِمْثَالًا عَلَى صِفَةٍ مَنْ تُرِيدْ وَأُرْسُمْ عَلَيْهِ الْخَاتِمِ. And the khatim is not, you write the seal on it, or you design the seal on the image, but there's no seal giving in this version of the recipe. Ma ism al-matlub wa ummihi wa afka'u aynai al-timthal bishawkatain wadahu fi kidr aswad wa fihi jir. So you put it, I will translate as I go along. So if you want to blind someone, an enemy or a bad person, take a piece of, or a ball of wax, and fashion from it an image, a figurine, on the manner of, or the resembling the person whom you want to harm. And then you write on it, you design on it the khatem, which is not given, the seal, some sort of a magical image or magical sign, with the name of the desired person and his mother. And then you gouge out the two eyes of the figurine with two thorns. And then you put it in a black pot, inside of which there's a lime and bilat tafi. I'm not sure how the Arabic works, but it's very clearly unspent lime, that is lime that is not yet burned, lime that is still fresh. And then you spray on it a little bit of leftover water from the hammam, from the baths, and then you bury the pot close to the place where the fire is burning. And then fa'in al-ma'amun lahu yasih an-nar. Then the one to whom you did this, or against whom you did it, will cry, the fire, and his two eyes will harm him, so much so that he will not be able to see anything, and he will ask he will cry for help because of the great pain. And do not leave it, this is interesting, do not leave it, don't leave the timthal, the figurine, for more than 7 days. For if you do that, the person for whom you did this, or against whom you did this, will die. And if you want to heal him, that is, if he's blinded and suffering in his eyes, but you suddenly decided that you want to heal him again, then you take the timthal out and you throw it in water. You take it out of the pot and you throw it in water. So this is what Bashatli and Rashid did, and Nicole Hansen basically repeats the same thing, and she has more recipes for voodoo dolls from the Islamic world, but they are already further removed from this kind of practice. And what I want to do, I want to show you some examples of Jews who use similar voodoo dolls. Two of them are from an earlier period and are different in the details from the one that you find in Albuni, and from also the object would have looked different from what you find from what was found in Fustat. The third one, as you see, is very much like what Bashatli and Rashid found. So I begin with an Aramaic magical recipe from a very famous Jewish magical text called the Sword of Moses. And there it says, if you wish to kill a person, take mud from the two banks of the river. This is very typical of Babylonian magic and then Babylonian Jewish magic. You take mud from both sides of the river and you make a figurine and you write the name of the victim on it. And you take 7 thorns from a withered date palm and you make a bow of some kind of wood. I don't know what that word is, and strands of horsehair. So you really make a bow. And you put the figurine in a cloth bag and stretch the bow over it and shoot it and say over every thorn. And this is a part of the structure of the Sword of Moses. There are spells to be recited. I won't go into it. So you say the spell from this section to that section, and you add, may so-and-so, son of so-and-so, the name of your victim, be injured and be put to sleep, or even may he be killed, or something like that. So you see the same idea. You make what we call a voodoo doll, this time from mud, and you prepare a bow and arrows, and you shoot arrows into the voodoo doll. And of course, what happens, this is the idea of similia similibus, or what Fraser called homeopathic magic. Just as this figurine suffers and is tortured, so may so-and-so suffer and be tortured. I bring you another example of an Aramaic recipe for such voodoo dolls. And it starts leshiluach esh, so for sending a fire or sending a fever. And then there are magic words, and then something which I don't fully understand. And here, the recipe apparently is missing some parts, so I don't get the instructions of how exactly to prepare the image, but it's clear that they're talking about this kind of figurine. You write on its forehead, on the forehead of the figurine, his name, that is the name of the victim and the name of his mother. And this mystery, you do that on the figurine. and then something, one word is missing, and bring 5 needles. Stick one in its heart, and one in its navel, and one in its 2 thighs, with its 2 hands on its knees, the right one to the left and the left one to the right. So you twist the figurine, and you stick needles into it in various strategic locations. And then you put it, the figurine, in a new vessel with its head below and its leg above, so upside down. And you bury it in a fresh grave, which is 1 day old or 2 days old. So again, you get this idea of preparing a figurine, torturing it a little bit, and placing it upside down in a vessel, and in this case, burying it in a grave. Now I move to my third and final example, and this is from the Cairo Geniza. So this is from Fustat itself. Remember, the find that Bashatli and Rashid found or published, they didn't know when it was from, how to date it. It doesn't have a clear date, but it has a clear provenance from Fustat. So the Cairo Geniza comes from exactly that place. And this recipe, I'm moving to the next page. I want to show you what the Geniza fragment looks like. You see here Bab Ramad Jaid Mujarrab, and you see the instructions. At the end of the instructions, you see Wahadihi al-Tasawir. These are the images or the signs that you have to write. We'll see it in a second. And the rest of the page is blank because this is a single recipe. So this is not a part of a magical recipe book. This is someone copying from a magical recipe book, copying for his own use or for the use of someone else, a single recipe for causing blindness. And then and the recipe, of course, is in Judeo-Arabic. For those of you, if there are any who prefer to read it in Arabic, you can read it in Arabic letters. I just transliterated it into Arabic letters. I'll just read the translation. A section or a recipe for causing blindness. It is good and tested. Many of them start with this, Jayed Mujarrab, it's good and it's tested. If you want to use it, cool white wax and make from it a figurine on the name of the person you want to harm and the name of his mother. And of course, in magical texts, they often use the name of the victim and of the mother, not the father, but the mother. And take 2 acacia thorns, shaukatein sant. So you take 2 thorns of the plant, the tree, the shrub, acacia, shita in Hebrew, and insert them in the figurine's eyes. So you blind the figurine with 2 thorns, and write this shape. And the shape is the magical signs that will appear at the end of the recipe. So you write this shape with wine. So you use wine as an ink, and bind it on the figurine's neck, and fumigate the text with liquid storax, and take a new pot and place inside it lime. So notice the lime that was both in Buni's text and in the actual find, we have it here too. And take the figurine and take it and turn it or place it head down inside the pot, and bury it in a dark house in which there's no one. And here you see in the Judeo-Arabic or in the Arabic, there are 3 words that I can't understand. What ta'aram or what tu'addim or something like that. Allahi bi ablukia. Ablukia is some sort of substance, but I'm not sure what it is. So I left this also here. I'm not sure. And this is why there's a small lacuna here. And this is its writing. And you will not see but 3 days, and he, the victim, will go blind. And it is an important, tested, true section. And these are the shapes, hadi tasawir, and now come the magical signs that you have to write on the thing that you put on the figurine, on the voodoo doll that you make. And again, this is the magical recipe. Now, what do I make out of all of this? First of all, that, Bashatli and Rashid and then Nicole Hans, and they adduced Islamic Arabic recipes, or one recipe for producing such voodoo dolls. As you can see, Jews were doing very similar things. And in this specific case, it's basically the same recipe. It's the same basic recipe as the one found in Al-Buni, which to me is not surprising at all, because there are a lot of similarities between Jewish magic and Muslim, and a lot of overlaps between Jewish and Muslim magic. And certainly in the Cairo Geniza, this is a process that I can show over and over again. I should add that I have 2 more fragments from the Cairo Geniza with similar recipes in Judeo-Arabic. I didn't introduce them here because they're not as well preserved, so I didn't want to go into all the philology of reconstructing them. But this is not an isolated case, there are at least 2 more. Another thing that we can see is that each of these recipes, well, let's say this recipe on the one hand, and the recipe by Albuni on the other, and the actual find, they all clearly share similarities. You know, you make a figurine, you blind it, you put it in a pot upside down with lime on the bottom. But then there are also many differences. For example, this recipe doesn't say that the pot has to be black. And of course, neither recipe says that you should make this very interesting contraption, which I find very curious, you know, that you sort of bind the figurine to the covering of to the lid of the pot, so that, because they basically say, you know, you put it upside down, but they don't say, you know, that it has to be tied like that and hanging right above the lime on the bottom of the pot. And this, again, the fact that we get the same basic recipe but with numerous variations is something that I find all over the place. This is very, very typical of magical texts and magical recipes and instructions. And it shows us that the people who are practicing these practices, they have some leeway. It's not that, you know, there is a stereotype in scholarship that, you know, they're very afraid, you know, they have to do everything exactly as it says, otherwise it won't work. They clearly don't see it like this. They clearly play around, and, you know, they make small changes here, small changes there, and there's some individual creativity going into the production of these, both in the copying of the recipes and then in the production of the actual objects. Then I want to ask 2 final questions. One, should we use the term voodoo doll? And I hope you can see this. This I took from the internet. This is a nice image of a lady who is holding the book Voodoo for Dummies. And as you see, what do you do when you use voodoo for dummies? You have candles. You have a nice little doll that's taken from some Hollywood horror film. You stab it all over the place. You see it's all torn up, and it's lying on a pentacle. So certainly, you know, in the public imagination, when we're talking popular imagination, when we're talking about voodoo doll, I think everyone can understand, you know, when people say voodoo, the first thing they think about is voodoo dolls, and everyone knows what it is. So it's a very useful term in that respect. Is it also useful for historians and people who do religious studies? This is, of course, more complicated, because these objects apparently have very little to do with real voodoo religion, that is, with the African religion that moved, or African rituals that moved to the Caribbeans with the slave trade, etc. And so, you know, there are people today who object to the very term voodoo doll and say that scholars should not use it. The reason why I do use it is that I still find it useful, because I clearly see here a cross-cultural phenomenon that's all over the place. In you know, basically in every culture we can imagine, people have this idea of making a likeness of their enemy and then hurting the likeness so that the enemy will be hurt. So I still find that term useful, even though I know it's a problematic term. That's also why I put it in quotation marks. The second question is, what do we do with these kinds of objects? What kind of an object is such a voodoo doll, or such an assemblage of, you know, the whole pot with the doll inside it, with the lime and everything? On the one hand, it's clearly not the work of a professional artist. It's clearly not the standard religious object, you know, unlike many of the objects studied in this workshop. It's clearly not meant to be seen by anyone. You know, when we are thinking of artistic objects and artistic production, it's usually intended to be visible so that people will see it and enjoy it. This kind of art and this kind of production is clearly intended to be invisible. You don't want anyone to see that you did that. And if they will see it and your enemy will see it, he can burn or whatever, or take the figurine out, and then the magic will stop working. So clearly, the only person who sees this is the user, or perhaps two persons. If the user goes to a producer who produces this for him or her, then you know, there are two people involved. There's a magician and there's a client, but they're the only people who will ever know about this and ever see this. On the other hand, it is a ritual object. It was produced as a part of a ritual. We get all the instructions, we saw that. And it's an object that was meant to have power. And this, I think, is very, very interesting. This concept of objects that in their own right are supposed to have power, to do things, to cause real effects in the real world, in this case, to blind someone. And this is presumably someone whom you see. So you should be able to see the effect within a few days or within a certain matter of time. So I think we are justified in talking about this and many other similar objects as magic art. And here, this leads me directly to the next talk we'll hear when Avigail will talk to us about the magic balls, because there too, you see the iconography of the demons and you see this kind of magic art. There's a very nice book now by Naama Vilozhny based on a PhD on the images on the Babylonian incantation bowls. And there she tries to develop this concept of magic art and to ask what kind of art is it that is really not done for beauty or for aesthetic value, but for its power, and how should we conceptualize this kind of art. I'm ending my talk with the most famous example from the ancient world of these kinds of voodoo dolls. This is 4th or 5th century CE, so this is before the rise of Islam. And this is on display in the Louvre. The picture on the right is a picture I took in the Louvre through the glass, that's why it's a lousy picture. And you get there already this idea of a jar. There you have a defixio, a cursed tablet written on lead, and you get this image of a woman, and here you see the woman, the image, the figurine very, very clearly. I think this calls for no further, I mean, this is as explicit as these things can get, so I don't think there's any further commentary needed. So I'll just stop here, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Gidi, and thank you for finishing on time. And now we move to the next speaker, Avigail Manekin-Bamberger, who is a fellow at the Martin Buber Society of Fellows at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Her research focuses on social and cultural history of Jews in antiquity, with special emphasis on Jewish magical texts and artifacts. Avigail, please.
Great. So everyone can see my screen and hear me? Good. Okay, so what are demons? How can a modern reader conceive the demonic? Many scholars have attempted to answer this question, such as Gideon Bohak, whom we have just heard. In an illuminating article, Bohak compares ancient conceptualizations of demons to modern-day attitudes to germs. A comparison that can be aptly understood after a year of exorcising COVID demons. Bohak's work on conceptualizing demons, as well as other studies, focuses on demons as harmful beings, such as this image here in the center of an Aramaic incantation bowl that is accompanied with the words, this is the figure of Mivchalta, which appears in dreams and takes on various forms. If our modern world is filled with germs, in antiquity, the equivalent with, as Bohak shows, many conceptual differences, was a world filled with spiritual beings, many demonic. When we turn to scholarly dictionaries of ancient languages, we similarly find a world filled with demons. A demon, or type of demon, is assigned to numerous entries, and not only those related to harmful beings, such as the Aramaic word shedim. Consider, for example, the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon online website, an excellent scholarly online dictionary for all ancient Aramaic periods and dialects that includes a database of numerous texts, including magical texts. And this is an important, ongoing, meticulous work which enriches our knowledge of spoken Aramaic dialects. Searching Kal, one can find the English translation demon or type of demon for over 100 different words. Now, for example, just to get the feel of it, this is the neder, nidra, vow, so we see it as vow, or the offering promised by a vow. And then number 3, a type of demon, and this is a Babylonian magic bowl koine, or a Jewish Babylonian Aramaic bowl, so they see it as a type of demon. Or the word tzvacha, tzvachata, which is either shout or grief. When it is on Babylonian magic bowl, it is considered as a type of demon. Anaka, anakta, a necklace charm, again, a type of demon. And lastly, tzimra, tzamar, tzimra, which is either heat or fever, poison, depends on the dialect. And when we're talking about Babylonian magic bowl koine, a name of a demon. So consequently, this means that there are, and this is just an example of, there are 100 different words or roots to articulate the word demon in ancient Aramaic dialects. And here are some examples. Now, the question is if there are really 100 ways to say demon. The question is not unlike similar questions, such as, are there really many words for snow in Eskimo languages, or for camel in Arabic dialects? And how do we assess words as different? To put this differently, the question is whether our ways of categorizing and clumping terms illuminates or obfuscates. So in my talk today, I will argue that much is gained by scrutinizing and de-demonizing the Aramaic words, typically associated with demons and demonology, to consider alternative schematizations. On the one hand, ancient Aramaic dialects do indeed contain numerous names of and names for demons, as we will see. However, identifying all words that appear on magical artifacts and that reflect harm with the demonic may be a product of modern reading, one that does not necessarily reflect the intent of ancient writers. Moreover, translating a variety of harms and afflictions with the English word demon may blind us to the nuances of ancient magic and even to the ancient human experience, which may have contained a much wider range of anxieties and fears than popular conceptions of demons. So I would like to demonstrate this phenomenon by focusing on a corpus of magical texts from late antique Babylonia, namely the Aramaic Incantation bowls. Now, just a few words of introduction to this collection, to this corpus. Dated to the 5th to 7th century CE, the bowls were generally intended to protect households from demons, curses, and malice. Some bowls were intended for other purposes, such as success in business, cursing enemies, gaining favor in the eyes of named individuals, and more. A scribe wrote incantations, divine names, curses, and spells in ink on the surface of an earthenware bowl, usually in a spiral fashion. Later, the bowl was buried upside down, as you could see in this picture, usually in the home of a named client who commissioned it. Some bowls include illustrations, as Gidi has spoke about, usually of demons that are bound in chains. For example, this chicken-like figure. And so the corpus, there are around 600 bowls and more than 600 bowls that were published already in scholarly editions, and another 1,500 that remain unpublished. Only a few hundred of these bowls are provenance, mostly coming from the region of Nippur, modern-day southern central Iraq. Most of the bowls are written in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic and in square Hebrew letters, as we've seen in this bowl before. And others are written in Syriac and Mandaic, such as these. Now, a prime feature of the incantation bowls is the appearance of long lists of demons and afflictions from which the client seeks protection. Of course, this is not unique to the incantation bowls, but it is a prominent feature. So consider, for example, this text, and this is from Naven Shakid's edition, and I'm just going to read the bowl text as it is translated, and you could see here the Aramaic for those who want to. This mystery is designated for healing Miharoi, son of Gushnai, Pidarduch, daughter of Dadai, his wife, Bar Shabate, Ima and Malbonai and Gushnai, the children of Pidaruch. May they be healed by the mercy of heaven, and may they be sealed from all. And now starts the list. Evil destroyers, from demons, from plague spirits, from devs, from afflictions. Devs is the Middle Persian word for demons. From misfortunes, from Satans, from evil Liliths, both male and female, from all evil sorceries and evil magic acts, from curses and vows and accidents and spells and afflictions, and from all evil and mighty destroyer. Amen, amen, Selah, hallelujah. Further, I adjure, invoke, decree, ban, and annul all mysteries of sorcerers and kinds of sorceries, falsities, knots, blows, spells, vows, necklace charms, accidents, curses, all Satan's evil spirits, malicious spirits, all magical acts, and all destroyers. I annul them by the Lord of the heaven, etc., etc. So you could see here the two lists. Sorry, one second. Yes, this is the light demon closing the light. So as you could see, the bowl specifies a variety of affliction from which Miharoi seeks protections. As a side note, I will comment that most of these afflictions are written in the dictionaries as demons or type of demons. Now, a closer look at this list may render a more nuanced depiction of the various harm listed. The different colors on your slide represents a possible alternative categorization schema for each affliction. So the words in yellow represent the category of harmful beings, denoted by the Aramaic and Middle Persian word for demons, shidei and divei, or a family of certain demons, Liliths. I'll get back to it. The words in green are part of the category of harmful actions or utterances made by humans, such as sorceries and curses. The words in pink are categorized as harmful objects, such as necklaces and knots, something that we also heard in the first day of this conference with Hannah-Lisa's lecture. And lastly, the words in blue might be categorized as harmful afflictions, such as misfortune. My initial work regarding the different afflictions appearing in the bowls show that they mostly fit these aforementioned categories, which are harmful beings, harmful utterances, harmful forces or afflictions. I know this is a bit redundant, harmful objects, and to that I would add also harmful spaces. Now, I mentioned that there are more than 100 words in the Kal dictionary translated as demons. So in Jewish, Babylonian, Aramaic, there are around 70, and about a third of them are harmful beings. Another third is harmful utterances, and the rest are distributed between the other criteria listed, such as harmful objects, forces, and spaces. And this more or less captures, I think, the distribution also in the lists of bowls. So just to look at this briefly, in harmful beings, we have categories or names of 4 demons, such as Shida, Diva, demons, devs, and La Tava, which is literally no good. And we also have names of specific demons, such as Mevchalta, Ashmedai, Lilith, who could either mean a specific named demon or a family of certain demons with probably the same that act similarly. We have harmful utterances that are made by humans, such as curses, vows, decrees, excommunications, certain words, and legal claims. Wait, I have to move you. Yes, we have harmful objects such as necklaces, sacks, knots, which we don't always understand exactly how they function. Afflictions such as darkness, dreams, heat or fever, and spaces, which are gutters, shadows, and roofs, for example. Now, I would like to stress that the details of the division and categorization I'm suggesting are subject to dispute. One could argue, for example, that Shivte, which literally means plague, and we saw this in the first bowl, should be read as an affliction. However, I categorized it as a harmful being because of its consistent appearance as part of a duo with the word for demons, Shidei, suggesting that they were understood to reflect a similar type of risk, and I'll get back to that. In addition, evil sorcery may coincide with harmful objects and not necessarily harmful utterances. And these examples can be multiplied. In other words, this is by no means a clear-cut categorical distinction. Nevertheless, categorizing the various afflictions demonstrates the wide range of harms from which individuals sought protection. While some of these misfortunes derive from demons, others are a result of human action. While some manifest themselves as a disease or a plague, some take the form of harmful object. Now, looking closely at the detailed lists in the magic texts may also help us to understand the different ends and magical techniques that were used in order to redress and combat these various harms. In the bowl for Miharoi that we read previously, we saw a joint rebuke of all sorts of afflictions by using annulments, right? We had may they be sealed, and then the whole list together, or I adjure, invoke, decree, and then the list appears together, all sorts of different harms. However, some bowls are more specific in the harm they are targeting and in the choice of the magical technique employed to do so. For example, a well-known motif of the bowls is expelling demons by using a divorce document, a get, gita. Examining formulae of writing divorce documents show that the action of writing a divorce is specifically intended for demonic beings, such as here, I'll read from line 2, and that which was in the court session of Rabbi Yoshua ber Prachia, I write to them a deed of divorce to all the demons and affliction demons and Satans and Yaror demons and evil lilies, male and female, and to all enemies and evil tormentors whose name is mentioned or whose name is not mentioned. So what we see here in the list is evil beings, and we're not divorcing with a divorce document, or they are not divorcing with a divorce document, vows or curses, etc. And it makes sense that the divorce functions as a representative of the division between beings, sometimes two humans and sometimes humans and the demonic. Another example is from the genre of curse bowls that are intended to counteract and fend off curses targeting the clients, many of which were collected and published by Dan Levine. In these bowls, we find formulae intended for human harm and not demonic harm. So for example, this bowl is, this is a charm to overturn. Now notice what they are overturning: sorceries and oaths and curses and knocks and magic rites and aversions from Abba, son of Barkita, unto Imi, daughter of Rivka, etc., etc. I adjure upon you evil sorceries and powerful magic acts and oaths and curses and knocks and magic rites and trumpet blowings, yes, shipure, shofarot, and bands that he has in his house and in his body and in his frame for the benefit of Abba, son of Barkita, that you may go and be overturned on all who curse them. So here, all the different utterances and actions are overturned, afichin, lemeifach, something that fits the context of human utterances. The intent is that the words be reversed, negated, and nullified, which is different from reversing. We don't see here demons or being. Now, the use of these specific formulae in the different bowls demonstrates that the writers were well aware of the differences in the harms that they meant to expel, and used specific formula accordingly, such as divorcing demons or overturning human curses. Now, it is worth emphasizing that the grouping of afflictions according to type, such as lists consisting of exclusively demons or beings, as we saw with the divorce, or lists including only human actions, such as in this case, that is not the majority of cases. In general, harm of different kinds are listed together and undifferentiated, as we saw in the first text. However, there are clusters of afflictions that appear frequently together that may help us to understand the meaning of more obscure terms. For example, and this is the text we saw before, the Shidei and Shivtei, demons and plague spirits, which I spoke about before, or the appearance of knots, kitrei, which appear consistently as part of a duo with sorcery, charashei, or at times with other objects and sorcery, such as in this elaborate formula. But both these formulae seem to point that knots were associated with witchcraft. The composition of lists from consistent building blocks may lead to conclusions regarding oral transmissions, but this topic will wait for a different occasion. So, conclusion. I'll drink. In my presentation today, I have attempted to categorize and demonize the afflictions that appear in lists of harms in magical texts. A close study of these long lists reveal that while demons were most definitely a constant and omnipresent threat, they were by no means the only threat, and translating human harm, for example, as demonic may not be an accurate definition. As is evident in these lists, the men and women who sought relief through these objects were fearful of many different things, of a diverse world of demons, of words uttered toward them by enemies or members of their family, of the jealous or glaring evil eye. They were also fearful of adverse actions such as tying knots and knocking. Certain places created horror as well, such as roofs, gutters, certain trees and shadows. Disease and nightmares, which may have or have not been induced by demons, are mentioned frequently as well. This partial list that I presented, deduced from the polls, teach us much about the multifaceted world that is sometimes flattened by modern readers that are historically and culturally far from these texts. However, attention to the extensive nature of these spells and the terminology they employ illuminates not only the unique malice in the techniques to ward them off, but also the spatial and temporal real-life experiences of individuals in late antiquity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Abigail, for a fascinating talk and for, again, being on time. And now we move to the third lecture. I understand it will be given by Uzi and Itamar.
Yes, I think that I will talk and maybe Uzi will comment later.
Okay, wonderful. So let me present both of you. Uzi Avner made his 3 degrees in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. From 1977 to 1999, he served as an archaeological inspector and district archaeologist of the southern Negev for the Israel Department of Antiquities, or the Israel Antiquities Authority. Since 1977, he is studying the material and spiritual cultures of the desert societies during the last 10,000 years. From 1999 to 2014, he taught archaeology in the Arava Institute and in Eilat branch of BGU, Ben-Gurion University. From 2008, he's continuing his studies in the Eilat branch of the Dead Sea Arava Science Center. So this is Uzi, and now I move to Itamar. Itamar Taxel received his PhD in archaeology from Tel Aviv University in 2011. Currently, he is the head of pottery specializations branch at the Israel Antiquities Authority. He is involved with various fieldwork and research projects on behalf of the Israel Antiquities Authority, Tel Aviv University, and the Israel Nature and Parks Authority. He has authored and co-authored 4 monographs and numerous articles and book chapters on the archaeology of early Rome to late Islamic Palestine. So Itamar, I understand that you begin, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Just a minute. Okay, so everybody can see the screen. Good. So this lecture presents a unique assemblage of small objects dated to the late Islamic period and identified as magical items, which were found in one of the campsites located along the eastern section of the Darb al-Ḥajj al-Masri, currently in southern Israel. Before I continue, I must say that Nitzan Amitai Price, which is also present here, is also participated in this study. She helps us a lot, specifically with the literary resources related to the Hajj. The main Hajj routes that connected the Levant and Egypt with the holy cities of Mecca and Medina were the Darb al-Ḥajj al-Shami, coming from Damascus, and Darb al-Ḥajj al-Masri, which departed from Cairo, passed through the Sinai Peninsula and joined the Darb al-Ḥajj al-Masri al-Shami in the Red Sea harbor town of Aqaba. Along the road sections that passes through the Eilat mountain region in southern Israel were surveyed and excavated several campsites, which were active mainly during the Mamluk and Ottoman periods, as well as a Mamluk period bridge, which formed part of this road. It was built specifically for this manner, and other features. Some sections of the road were also documented and even reconstructed in recent years, as you can see, for example, in this left image. And this is one picture of the representative picture of the Mamluk bridge. Netafim Camp 2 is a small site located on a mountain slope circa half a kilometer to the south of the spring of Ein Netafim and 9 kilometers northwest of the Red Sea shore. The site was first documented in the early 1960s by a team directed by Better Rothenberg, and since the 1990s by Uzi Avner and his colleagues. It is composed of several sparse structures, mainly round tent bases, in addition to a solid building which functioned as a bakery. The magical objects find spot is a natural depression located at the southeastern end of the site, as can be seen in this image. This is the approximate location that I marked in on the aerial photo. Just a minute, sorry. Yes, it is located on the southeastern end of the site at some distance from the nearest structures. So this was probably not coincidental. These objects were accidentally discovered in 1996 by Moti Shem Tov. Following the discovery, an excavation was carried out at the site by Uzi Avner and Asaf Holzer. They excavated the area of the artifacts find spot and 2 pairs of tent bases in the area of the site itself. In this image, you can see the bakery building as it in a better state of preservation than today, before it was partially collapsed in 1995 due to an earthquake. And the 2 pairs of the excavated tent bases excavated by Uzi and Asaf Holzer, and even a fragment of a yet undeciphered and unpublished Mamluk, or at least Mamluk or Ottoman monumental Arabic inscription found on the site's surface. Rothenberg's and Avner's surveys, as I said, one in the 1960s and the other in the 1990s and later on, of the site yielded a modest amount of finds. This is typical to desert sites and this specifically, such as seashells from the Red Sea, obviously, Mamluk and Ottoman pottery sherds, late Ottoman military copper buttons, and an early 17th century Ottoman Egyptian coin, as we can see in the right image number 3. The unique assemblage of magic, mostly ceramic objects, is composed of a number of artifact classes. Clay rattles form the most abundant category, with almost 60 documented fragments. These are handmade, asymmetrical small bowls made of 2 hemispheres. The sounding elements of the rattles, apparently 1 or 2 small stones, were put inside before the 2 hemispherical parts were attached. The commonest type of rattle is about 3.5 centimeters in diameter, and the second type is larger and more oval in shape, probably about 9 centimeters in length. As you can see, the 2 numbers 1 and 2 and the small group here are fragments of the commonest type, the rounded, and number 3 in the middle is one of the few fragments of the larger oval type. All the rattles were made of the same clay, which based on its components is most likely of Egyptian origin. This is a most probably Nilotic clay, as we can say based on the naked eye and even petrographic and also petrographic examinations of these and other and similar objects. Clay rattles of the first type have thus far been documented from a number of sites in central and southern Israel, and in one site, at least I know, one site in Jordan, such as a group of complete rattles from Nahal Yacham in the Negev, seen on the right image. Most, if not all, of these rattles are also made of Egyptian clay, and I can say that because I personally examined almost all of the rattles known from the country. Rattles of the second oval type are much more uncommon. Both types were found in contexts dated to the early Islamic and mainly Mamluk and Ottoman periods. This map shows the distribution of the known, at least thus far, known sites in the region in which Islamic clay rattles were found. As you can see, they start in the, let's say, in the Carmel area in the north, and end in the Netafim area, Netafim site near Elat, and the only Jordanian site is located here. Hurvitz Faris to the east of the Dead Sea. This category, the second category of clay incense burners, is composed of two near-complete altar-like objects and at least 5 other fragments of similar item or items. They were fashioned by hand from the same Egyptian clay as the ceramic rattles and share similar characteristics and dimensions. They have a rectangular hollow body with 2 fenestrae in the middle of the long side, 4 pointed legs, and the concave upper surface. The concave upper surface indicates that the objects were designated to carry some material or another object. These objects share general similarities with ceramic incense burners found in various Arabian sites, notably in Yemen. However, no parallel for such incense burners were identified by us in artifact assemblages published neither from the southern Levant nor from Egypt, in which they were most probably produced. Sorry, not yet. The identification of these objects as incense burners can theoretically be contradicted by the absence of burn marks on their upper curved surface, where incense was presumably put to burn with live coals. However, the absence of burn marks does not exclude their identification as burners. There is also a possibility that they were intended for burning scented oil, which would not leave a trace. Alternatively, these might represent votive burner-like objects which were not intended for use with burning substance, but only to visualize the use of actual incense burners. One of the most surprising finds from the site was a near-complete clay figurine of a female, which was made of the same Egyptian clay as the rattles and burners. The figurine depicts a schematically executed and disproportional human figure standing in a slight spread. The breasts indicate that the figurine describes a female, despite the absence of any facial features or genitalia. In addition to the near-complete figurine, at least 10 other fragments of figurine arms and legs were found, as you can see in the lower part of the image, which indicate for the deposition of at least 4 or 5 more figurines of the same place. A thermoluminescence analysis made to the figurine, to the complete figurine in Oxford, indicates that it was produced in the early 17th century. The only published parallel to this item is a fragmentary figurine seen on the right, excavated in Jerusalem. It was made of the same Egyptian clay, and I can testify for it, and originated in a Mamluk or early Ottoman context based on the pottery found together with it. Other objects related to the assemblage include a single fragment of a ceramic zoomorphic figurine, seen on the top, maybe some kind of animal we cannot yet securely identify it. 2 fragments of unidentified ceramic items, and both these items and, again, the clay animal figurine, all of them are made of the same Egyptian clay as the other artifacts I showed before, and a group of 14 color quartz pebbles. Quartz is not local to the site geologically, and they were all brought to the site and put together. You see that they have different colors. In reality, the colors are much more bright and nice, and they were probably also part of this unique assemblage. The unique artifactual assemblage from Netafim Camp 2 provokes several questions. First, the function of the discussed object. Second, the identity of the person or persons who owned and used these items. And third, was the use of and the position of these objects related to the Hajj. The commonest objects, the rattles, can be seen either as a material culture indicating the presence of children, or as objects that served apotropaic purposes, namely to expel the evil eye. The small incense burners are mostly familiar from secular or domestic contexts. However, incense was also used during certain magical rituals, for instance, when demons were summoned for a consultation. Perhaps the most remarkable component of the discussed assemblage is the human figurines, at least some of which representing females. Based on their raised arms, these figurines can generally be classified as representing the orante or orans motif. Several different interpretations were suggested for this posture, but most are leading to the interpretation of orante figures as representing deities or demons, mostly in association with female and male fertility. Anthropomorphic orante figures, which more or less resemble the Netafim Camp 2 figurines, are depicted on medieval and post-medieval Islamic period incantation or magic balls, such as an 18th century ball for the Damascus citadel excavations seen on the left. Depictions of schematic figures of female demons are also known from late medieval and early modern Muslim magic books and talismans. For instance, an evil female demon known as al-Habiba, the lover, is depicted on a magic book composed in 16th century Spain, as can be seen on the right. Another female demon was engraved on the back of a silver pendant talisman from Oman. Archaeological evidence for the production and use of lead anthropomorphic talismans in the shape of female figures with raised arms was found in medieval Islamic context in Spain. The continuation of using magical objects in the shape of human figures, both female and male, among Muslims until recent days is indicated by schematic 19th and 20th century copper magic puppets documented in Iran. These puppets often bear incised Quranic verses and are used as talismans designated to invoke mighty jinns or demons, mostly for love, affection, or fertility. As such, they form part of white magic, which, contrary to black magic, is considered positive and religiously legitimate in Islam. From Egypt itself, we know about a ceramic voodoo puppet, as we just saw in Gideon's lecture, apparently medieval in date. And now, after Gideon's talk, we know that this was certainly, most certainly a medieval voodoo puppet. And about various early modern wax and paper figurines used for both black and white magic, used in rural settlements in Egypt in the early 20th century, at least until the early 20th century. In our view, the location of the unique artifactual assemblage at the fringes of Netafim Camp 2 leaves little doubt that these objects were owned by one or more individuals who engaged with magic or sorcery, most probably on site. The apparent Egyptian origin of most of these objects suggests that their owner too arrived from Egypt. The individual, perhaps a woman, who owned the magical objects from Netafim Camp 2 could be one of the Egyptian pilgrims headed to the Hijaz, who, upon camping at a site, also engaged with magic. In summary, Netafim Camp 2 is one of several campsites along the Darb al-Ḥajj section, which connected Egypt and the Hijaz. The people who used the site, as you saw before, usually left behind modest architectural and even fewer material culture objects. Therefore, the deposition of uncommon objects found at the site is highly exceptional with respect to both the object's quantity and function, which was most probably associated with magic rituals. These Egyptian magic items reveal certain aspects of the identity of the Hajj attendants and their manners, who otherwise might have remained invisible, at least from the archaeological or material point of view. The discussed assemblage contribute to the knowledge on magic in the Muslim world, even if presently, and we admit that this is the, let's say, problem, even if presently we cannot identify these objects with specific magic rituals or specific supernatural powers to which such acts might have been addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Itamar. And we turn now to the questions. Anyone who wants to ask, please raise your hand. Daphna, I saw your hand. Daphna, you are muted. Daphna, you're muted.
Yes, I've noticed. It took me a while. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I haven't been here all the time from the very beginning, but I very much enjoyed the last talk. And I wish to suggest that it's much more what happened there to make visible what happened there in the anthropological dimension. These findings are themselves, when they concern the anthropological angle, are very, very important. But I think it's much more than that, because we, historians, Islamicists, we think of a Hajj as coming from one place to Mecca, and there is almost no, I think, I haven't checked it seriously, but as far as I know, we know very little about what happened along the road. So I think this is a very important contribution. For instance, there is one study that I can think of about camps or even communities that emerge among the pilgrimage road that connects West Africa to both Mecca and Jerusalem. Something happened there. I mean, it's not just that people address themselves to the holy places, because there are stations along the road, and there are merchants along the road. There is life along the road. Some people settle there. There are settlements that grow along the road. So I think that this is it's a very important example of what's going on there. And another angle that I can think of is what we call, it happens along the road to the Hajj, so-called normative Islam, Orthodox Islam. And the popular mingles with the so normative and Orthodox, if we would like to high culture and popular culture. And it's only natural because there are people that are making their way. So I think it's a very important contribution, and something can be done, further be done with Islamicists, what happens that are engaged in the Hajj, in the road itself.
Thank you, Daphna. I think that we think the same, because we are working on the publication of this assemblage against its broader context, both the Hajj and the geographical context, and we are dealing with these questions. Of course, we also raise the idea of two kinds of, let's say, religious belief, both the Orthodox and the more popular the official and the less official, and of course people who made different things along the road. In this case, because the objects are most probably all, if not most, if not all of which are of Egyptian origin, we think that they were brought by an Egyptian person or by at least somebody coming from Egypt, and for some reason left at the site. Maybe it was on purpose. Maybe the artifacts were also, maybe some of them were broken on purpose. During or after the magic rites, maybe the location at the end, in a quite remote, topographically low location of the site was intentional. Maybe not everybody loved to see such rites happening in the context of a Hajj camp. Maybe other people did not like it and caused the artifacts to being broken. And there are many questions and many options, but I think that yes, as I said, it's very important and rare, very rare contribution to the story of the Hajj and common people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, Susie, please.
Usually we speak of popular belief, but do we really know that upper standard people were exempted from magic?
What does it mean?
Anyone can answer?
I can try to answer, but I think we should let people like Gideon and other students of the topic talk about this.
Let me just say one thing, and that is in the Geniza materials, when I look at the handwritings of the people who are actually writing the recipes, I can see the whole gamut from you know, semi-illiterate people who can barely write anything to highly trained scribes who are clearly, you know, upper class people and who know exactly what they're doing. So I think many people were involved in these kinds of activities, and it's certainly not just lower class. It could be that some people had, you know, more elaborate or sophisticated techniques than others. That could be, but I don't think that this distinction between, you know, the educated elite and the superstitious masses really holds water.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add to that it's not just a question of upper or lower classes. It's very much a question of two trends within a community, one of which criticizes the use and the other which makes use. And I'm not sure you can actually divide them in many social, clear social criteria, but you do have debates within all monotheistic religions about the use of these powers. They can often be based on the fact that everybody agrees that there is some kind of power, magical power, but they will say that it is either positive or negative, moral or immoral, and so on. So that is the type of debate that goes on more than do we think that the upper classes ignored magic.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question. Do we know
Please.
of protest of Arab figures against the human figures in magic of Arab VIPs also?
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the question. Can you repeat it, please?
Do we know of any protest against the human figures by Arab VIPs, writers?
I don't know of anything specific. I do know of criticism of magic, but I don't know of anything so technical.
Mm-hmm.
I will answer for the Jewish side, not for the Islamic side. This issue comes up in the whole discussion of talismanic magic, because in addition to other types of magic, some of the things that Itamar showed actually are talismans, what in Arabic is called tilsam or tilasam, and which comes from the Greek word telisma. And these are usually figurative images, many times images of humans, and then you manipulate them and do all kinds of things. And there are medieval Jewish authors who say that this is, very clearly idolatry. This is not just magic, but this crosses the line into idolatry, because you make all these figurines and you fumigate to them, and you treat them as divine beings in a way. So there clearly is a polemic, a specific polemic against this type of magic. It's less to do with what we call voodoo dolls, because they are less visible. The talismanic magic is sort of a high art, and intellectuals do it, with all kinds of astrological calculations and things like that. And then there are people who say, this is idolatry. This is making images and really worshiping them in a way. So they forbid that very vehemently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Nitzan. I can't hear you. Now you're muted. Do you want to write a question and send it? Okay, I suggest, Nitzan, if we can't hear you, that you write the question. Meanwhile, are there any other questions or observations? Yes, William.
Thanks very much indeed.
Sure.
It's a question for Gideon, reflecting on your closing remarks there after a really fascinating paper. And you said, I didn't write it down, but I think you said something like this is not a standard religious object or a normal religious object. And I just wonder if you could reflect on that a bit more. In what ways might this object nuance or muddy our understanding of what a standard religious object is? I mean, I'm reflecting on Daniela's, quoting of Birgit Meyer back in our opening session, and thinking about, material religion being a pleonasm, or the idea that it might become a pleonasm, and just whether just typologies of standard religious objects, and how your case study might sort of force us to rethink some of those issues. Thank you.
Well, I think that the easiest answer would be to invoke Durkheim and Moss and others, who said that, from their perspective, the primary distinction between religion and magic is between community or church and individual. And in this case, there's no doubt that these objects are objects made by an individual, again, perhaps two. So there might be what we would call a magician or a practitioner, and the client, but there's no community. There's no, and therefore, and one of the ways you can see the result is that there's a lot of freedom in what exactly do you do then. The recipe says one thing, you sort of improvise it. I really like this thing where they sort of put it on a thread, and think of this image of your enemy hanging upside down right above the line that will, it's caustic, it's acidic, it will ruin it will destroy the figurine eventually, or, if the figurine ever falls into it. But this is someone did it, as an ad hoc thing. This was not in the recipe, at least not in the recipes that I saw. And this is something you wouldn't do so much with the religious object. You're more constrained. The community expects something of a religious object. They have the idea of what the religious object would look like, and you want to work within that framework, and you want the whole community to be happy with it. And with these objects, you basically couldn't care less, because you're doing it on your own, and no one will ever see it. I think there's a big distinction here between even religious objects that are made for home use. I think in the Jewish case about a mezuzah, about things like that, they would be uniform, and they would be approved by the community. You don't need all these things when you do your magical objects. So the objects will look different, and especially when you have a series of objects, you will see that they do not conform to any basic laws that were decided by someone. Their only aim is to be as powerful as possible.
Nimrod?
Yes, Afner.
Yes. Yes, it's a matter of it's a distinction between community and personal or private use, but the distinction is not that clear. And yesterday we heard about ordinary so-called people and the accessibility that they have to the normative, to the communal, to the prescribed objects. I mean, more and more, I try to show it in relation in the case of the mantle of the sheikh. It's kind of accessible to everyone. Everyone can touch it. Everyone can get a piece of it. And yesterday we saw we heard about very nice examples how pilgrims come to the Holy Land and everyone holds the relic on his chest, and the many, I mean, saintliness and belief, and there's those objects that represent belief and prophethood and saintliness. They become in time, they become very accessible. And we see it also, there is a very nice example in Jewish history that I learned from Professor Avri Bar-Levav, whom I think that most of you know, about, the example is about the little books. I mean, everyone in the pre-modern era in Jewish communities, there is a stage that everyone has, the little books are the Siddur, the Hebrew main central prayer book, and common people, everyone actually holds it, has it. It's not like that you have to go, only you can hold it, touch it, and observe it, and hear it, the prayer, and pray with it when you go to the synagogue. You can do it everywhere, at every occasion. So it's kind of the distinction between community and private becomes blurs from various reasons in various times and locales, but this is the process, I think. You can see it also in Rabbi Nachman, yes, that he became even more accessible after his death. He's everywhere in the tablet. We know the book by, oh, I forgot the name suddenly. Yes, he shows how the Rabbi becomes so accessible where he's absent actually after his death. Can hold the Rabbi in his hand. So this is something that we can also think of when we deal with these various objects, the normative and the popular and the allowed and the forbidden, whatever.
Yeah, I fully agree. I would put exactly your last point about the allowed and the forbidden, or what you said before, prescribed, and my stuff is proscribed. So this is where the distinction really is, because it's stuff that's not just individual religion or individual ritual, it's also ritual that people are not supposed to do. Certainly aggressive magic is something you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's it. I agree.
Anybody else wants to? Yes,
Hagit.
I have two questions. So one for Gideon. You talked about the magician, but I want to know if there is any real way to know more about the magician. Maybe one hand that you can see in this recipes, or if it's maybe the rabbis talk about the magician. And this is one question. And the other question is for Avigail, about if it's possible to make, or if you did already, maybe some kind of typology. I'm an archaeologist, so I want to know about the dates. So I want to know if there is a possibility to make typology that then you can make some chronology of these specific terms that you found.
I will answer first, and very quickly, it's very hard to know who the magicians are. I mean, what we have is anthropological research. That we have a lot, and Taxel, Itamar showed us some images from Blackman's, book on the Falachin of Egypt and things like that we can easily do. when it comes to the Geniza materials, I can sometimes identify the same hand in different magical recipe books, but it still doesn't tell me who that hand belongs to. So the answer is I don't really know. I don't really have a lot of evidence on that. And I'll leave the floor to Avigail.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think there's a matter of chronology because we see all of these terms in multiple and dozens of different bowls. What I showed at the end, that some bowls are more sophisticated in their use of magical means to ward off specific types. This could be a matter of more sophisticated magic bowls. One of the things I'm trying to do in general is to break up this corpus into bowls that are more I don't know, intelligent or sophisticated. And it could be, I don't know yet, that these sophisticated uses of magical means and not just clumping them, all the terms together, may be a product of more of a certain type of genre, but I don't know that yet.
Other questions? Daniela, please.
Thank you for all three papers. Gidi, you said you used the term cross-cultural phenomenon. Maybe it's a universal. I have two questions regarding this term. One, cross-cultural, you mean that both, in your case, Jews and Muslims use the same objects and the same practices, or perhaps Jews go to a Muslim practitioner, Muslims go to a Jewish practitioner. Do we have any evidence of that? That's one question. And the other question, if we understand cross-cultural as universal, and here I actually address the three of you, is can we date, continuing Chagit's question, can we date magical objects in any other way than by their context? I mean, is there any, like with ceramics, that some magical objects clearly belong to late antiquity and others to the Mamluk period? I mean, we span here the whole medieval period is according to Islamic periodization. Do we find the same objects all those 800 years, or can we put them in some chronological order and see that there's a dynamic in the production and in the shapes magical objects assume?
So I will answer just the first question. First of all, what I was basically saying is that the practice of voodoo dolls is universal. Then when you get to this specific assemblage of, a pot with lime, with a voodoo doll upside down, things like that, here I would say I probably wouldn't find exactly this assemblage in other places. And where I find a recipe that's very, very similar, once in Judeo-Arabic and once in Arabic, then I say, okay, here there are cross-cultural influences. And that's also why I brought, for example, two other Jewish examples that, you get this idea of a voodoo doll, but it doesn't look the same. The practice is different. You have an arrow, you shoot a bow, you shoot arrows into it, etc. With regards to Jewish magicians or Jewish practitioners and Muslim clients and vice versa, yes, it's documented. I don't know if anyone ever tried to collect all the relevant evidence. I don't know of any paper that, that tried to do that. For earlier periods, I know, for late antiquity, there's a paper, for example, by Giancarlo Lacerenza on Christian clients going to Jewish practitioners for amulets and things like that. I can't think, of a similar article for the medieval Jewish Muslim context. What can easily be shown and has been shown many times is that the Muslim magical texts are full of Jewish influences, and there have been many studies of that by Goldziher and Weida and Wasserstrom and many others, and vice versa. That the Jewish magical texts for example, from the Cairo Geniza are full of Islamic influences, and again there have been many studies, for example, by Shaul Shaked and many others. So that the magicians are talking to each other and learning from each other, there's no doubt at all. about cross-cultural contacts between magicians of one faith and clients of the other, yes, it's documented, but I can't give you, one survey that tried to collect all the evidence. And the other questions, I'll let the others answer because they're more difficult.
Well, I think regarding the second question, besides the archaeological context, well, in bowls, for example, you have some bowls with specific dates, but there are definitely trends that you see, for example, the incantation bowls until the rise of Islam, and then we don't find them anymore. Or certain genres in magic, such as summoning demons, is something we find more, and this Gidi could speak more about, but you could find more in the Geniza, and we don't find it as much before. So although there is a continuity of tradition from the Second Temple until today, there are definitely different kinds of trends that you find in different places that have to do also with local influences.
Okay. Itamar, you want to speak?
Well, okay. There is not much to say about the, let's say, chronotypology of late Islamic or Islamic period magical objects, or let's say multi-purpose objects such as rattles. The rattles, the globular rattles that I showed, are documented in Israel and the vicinity in context dated to the early Islamic, let's say, Abbasid Fatimid period, and mainly Mamluk and early Ottoman. So you see, they span the several hundred years, and they look exactly the same. They're all made of the same Egyptian clay. They look exactly the same. At least in cases they are coming from well-dated or more or less well-dated context. So here you can't say by given a rattle its date unless you know its context. Well, the other artifacts I showed are unique. You know, let's say the incense, the miniature or votive incense burners are unique. There are no more parallels for them. And in this context, they're most probably early Ottoman. And also the figurines. The figurines from Netafim are early Ottoman, and the single example parallel, fragmentary parallel from Jerusalem is more or less contemporaneous. So there are not so much magical objects from late Islamic and specifically late Islamic periods found in archaeological context that we can build a film typology of which and in chronology.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we ran over our time. So unless there's some urgent question that we want to ask to the full form, we can just interact with each other. And if not, I understand that we meet again in half an hour. That's
5 o'clock,
right?
yeah. Israel time, yeah.
Yes. So thank you very much for all the speakers and all the participants. And we'll see you in a little while.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.